So I'm very, very happy to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Nat Hens from BTEC. He is the, my eyes are going. He's the Assistant Director of Analytical Labs at BTEC, and his presentation, Comprehensive Hands-On Training for Biopharmaceutical Manufacturing. Nat.
All right, hi everyone. Thanks for sticking around. I'm going to change up things a little bit. Throughout the day we've been talking a lot about the various technologies. So what I'm going to do is switch it up and talk about how to prepare for these new technologies. And what I'll introduce you to is the Biomanufacturing Training and Education Center, and talk to you a little bit about our training program, what we are, and then how we've incorporated the training program into an FDA training. So we have a big contract with the Food and Drug Administration, and we actually provide the training for a lot of the investigators in the biopharmaceutical realm. So again, you guys have been talking about these emerging therapies, emerging technologies. Somebody has to train the people that are going out and working with these folks as they go through their investigations. So welcome, and again, this has changed things up a little bit, so stick around. The Biomanufacturing Training and Education Center, I won't go too much into detail on that, just some highlights. We are part of the College of Engineering at North Carolina State University. And if you want more information, we're right over here, booth 5475. Got some folks waving here. But we are a simulated GMP facility, and what we do is we've got a scale-up operation up to 300 liters, so we can take a process from pretty much all the way from upstream development through downstream processing into bulk fill, and we also have analytical along the way, and that's really what I run to support the operations. We also have a program where we do bioprocess services, analytical services as well. But really the main part of the talk is on training. So let me talk a little bit about what it is we've been doing. We've been working with the FDA. They approached us over 8 years ago to develop a program. And if we think about the biopharmaceutical realm, it's been out there probably 25 years, and we made a lot of improvements over the past decade or so. And about 8 years ago, the FDA realized that there was a shortage of investigators to get out into that industry. So what we wanted to do is pool our resources and provide a training program to get these already experienced investigators into the biopharmaceutical realm. And if you notice the very bottom statement here, most of the investigators that we are working with, and we still continue to work with, they're very experienced in small molecules, and maybe some people are actually in the food. So it's really about switching gears into the biomanufacturing sector. Talk about all of the new processes that they're going to be encountering as they switch platforms. I have a little small statement here. This is pulled directly out of our contract with the FDA. And it was really for us to, again, provide training and to get folks trained in this realm. Remember, they're small molecule or food. It's really about getting them to think about biopharmaceutical manufacturing, training them in that sector. And if we look at this graph below, you guys are all well aware, you're in the sector, and that's why we're here at this bio conference. But if you look at this bar graph, these are biopharmaceutical approvals since 2002. So every year, it ranges from 10 up to close to 30 approvals per year. They're not going away. In fact, they're becoming more and more prevalent, and it makes our job that much more important. So I have 2016 here. There's 6, but we're not done with the year yet, so I don't want to have people worry too much about our approvals there. But along with that, we have this rapidly changing landscape, and that's really what the talks are focused around here, and the whole conference actually, it's about all of these different technologies. We have the new therapies. You guys have been hearing some about that. The cells, the genes, conjugates, fusions, et cetera. New delivery systems, different injectables, patches, inhalables. New manufacturing technologies. There's a lot of interest in continuous biomanufacturing to improve costs, high capacities, disposables. We've also got new analytical technologies. Okay, so this conference is mostly centered around bioprocess and biotechnologies, but the analytical technologies have to keep up as well. And then we've got this generic statement that I have as biosimilars. This encompasses everything, but it's a new realm, relatively speaking, for these investigators. So you have to think about what it is we're trying to do. We're taking investigators that have a wealth of knowledge around small molecules and foods, and these people are switching gears and going out into the biopharmaceutical. So that's a new realm for them, and then we have all of this, this is what I call rapidly changing landscape. So to do that, what we're trying to do at first, and this is what we've been doing for the last 8 years, is really building this foundation. If you look at, I've got a lot of key words embedded within these bricks, and these are fairly generic words, but what we're trying to do is teach the FDA these various concepts before we even start thinking about some of these new technologies, because we've got to build people up before we introduce them to these new technologies. You guys can take a look. You know, it's basically process parameters, single use, method validation, various key concepts here that we're trying to build up. So what we've done is, with this in mind, we take you see the graphic there of a bioprocess. It doesn't matter what it is. This happens to be for monoclonal antibodies, but it doesn't really matter what it is. What we're trying to do is break that up into 4 segments, if you will. There's the QC Analytical, that's the program that I run. We've got upstream processing, downstream processing, and then the aseptic processing, looking at the fill finish. So what our job is in this training program, it's to establish the necessary background information for biopharmaceuticals that were related to these various topics. And the way we've got this set up is each of these courses, we do online components, and then we have the on-site or hands-on components. And what I found very interesting from my background is industry, and when I think about FDA, I typically, probably like most folks here, it sends chills up your back and you want to run the other way. But what's really been interesting about working with them is they're very, very interested in learning these technologies to apply it to their investigation jobs. So it's a very rewarding program that we have as instructors. But the duration, it's about 5 weeks. We've got online hours, about 12 hours. And yes, this includes quizzes, so people have to go through. It's not just sitting back at your viewing leisure and then being done with it. There's some milestone quizzes that they have to get through, and then there's a webinar. And that webinar, that actually bridges the gap. So this online material we've developed, so they can go through it. They've got a couple of weeks to go through it on their own, at their own time. And then we bridge that gap with a webinar. We get everybody together. So far at this point, it's all remote. They can do this from wherever. And then we get into the hands-on activities. This is the 24 to 28 hours on site where the group comes in. It's 3.5 days, depending on the track that they take. All of these courses are taking place throughout a year. So it's a cohort of about 15 students, sometimes more or less, but it's generally 15 students, and they'll do QC Analytical, and then they come back the next quarter and do upstream processing, and then the next quarter downstream processing, and then finish up with the aseptic. So by the time they go through this, they've had every segment of biomanufacturing that one would need to know to get into the basic investigations. And What I'm going to do here is talk very briefly about the summaries of these courses. I won't go into a lot of detail, but what I do want to do is illustrate the sort of topics that we cover. So in the QC Analytical, we obviously provide an overview, and this is where we get to take a lot of the concepts that are actually similar to what they would find in the small molecule realm, and we go over the assay attributes, the basic statistical parameters, and in various applications and technologies, and bring them up to speed, make sure we're all speaking the same language, and then we start getting into the analytical methods. And this is what I find very interesting as an instructor. The technologies typically are the same as what they would use in the small molecule realm, but now we've got a much more complex molecule that we're dealing with, so we have to consider those in these analytical methods and assays. So you see a whole panel. We have part one, we have the various UV vis, HPLC, all these things that you would actually find in the small molecule realm, and then we get into the more sophisticated protein characterization tools, the glycosylation analysis, microbiological, so on and so forth. And once we've had our work with the group, they go on to the upstream processing, so they come back in roughly 2 to 3 months, and they'll go through the microbial and animal cell culture. And again, this is a new topic for these folks. All of us out here, we've been working in it. But a lot of these investigators, again, small molecules, now we get to bring them up and talk about the cell biology, what it is, what it means to deal with microbial and mammalian cells. And then we get into the bioreactor design, the various unit operations there, and then the support. So these would be around facilities, process utilities, CIP, SIP type of operations. And we even touch on the subject of process analytical technology. Following the upstream processing, we get into the downstream processing. And these are all of the recovery operations, the purification, formulations, those types of things. And then we start getting into some of the special topics. And what's interesting about the special topics is that part of it actually changes with respect to the technologies that are available currently taking place, or what industry is moving toward. So we try to keep the FDA with not just the older technologies that are established, but we want to keep them abreast of the new technologies. And we do that with downstream for sure, with a lot of the single use and the continuous operation, and analytical with some of the newer systems there. And then finally, we follow up the fourth and final training segment with aseptic processing. So what they'll do is look at facility design, environment, and then some of the pre-manufacturing. So that would be the component prep, and then the compounding, and then manufacturing, fill, finish. So we do have an aseptic suite. As you can see in the photo there, people will go through each of these operations. So again, to re-emphasize the way we go about this training, there is a lecture component online, so they can do this remote, and then there's that bridge where we actually interact with them real time through webinar, and then they come into the facility and go through a bunch of hands-on activities that cover these various components that I've highlighted here. I don't expect you guys to read this entire slide here. I can barely read it myself because, well, let's face it, I'm older and my eyes are starting to fail. But what I do want to talk about are the topics that it's really about evaluating this course. So we don't just send people through and then they do a quiz. We actually have information. We gather information about before the course, how they're actually going through these investigations. Do they feel comfortable asking in-depth questions? And then we have follow-up. And if you look at for instance, I've highlighted in red the QC Analytical, well, just mainly because I run that part of the course here. And so what you do is you look at prior behavior, and then predicted behavior, and then the actual behavior after 6 months or so. So we actually have follow-up with the investigators, and in most cases, we always see very, very positive impact. And a lot of times, since I run the course, I see did the cohorts for the first time, and then I see them over the rest of the year through the other classes, being able to interact with them and talk to them real time about how they're implementing the learnings into the real situation. It's always been a very positive impact. Then if you look at the overall student feedback here, and of course evaluations, we have, it's about this greater awareness, and that's what I want to talk about a little bit here. They understand the various components of these segments here, upstream, downstream, analytical, aseptic, and they focus on the various failure parameters. And afterward, again, these are people that are filling these out. They strongly agree that the course provided them with the information and skills to effectively carry out the responsibilities. And this is where we actually gather that feedback, and we find out that they're actually indeed using that information for part of their job. What this really means is we're building this foundation for biopharmaceutical. And now, as you can see from the title here, future of the program. I think we've talked a little bit about this successful training program and then the evaluations, but it's really about the next phase here. And this is about the new technologies where we're actually headed here, and the new biological product types, new process analytical technologies. That's really where it is, where we are currently. Is we build this foundation, and now we've got to get past that hurdle and get into some of these newer technologies that are being highlighted actually throughout this whole series of programs today. And with that, I'm going to conclude, and if you have any questions, feel free to, I think we have time for maybe a question or two, or if you out walking around and you think of some questions about training, feel free to stop by our booth right there, and we'll be happy to talk to you about that. Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for the attention. I'm really happy and pleased to see folks coming in for this. All right, thank you.